Hi everyone! Today I want to share a card that I made using up a bunch of scraps of Flowers for Every Season Designer Series paper. I had a lot of scraps left over because I did a bunch of stamp camps to go using this floral paper, which is gorgeous, and I had all these little scraps left over, and I had to come up with a theme for this month's swap with my group, and so I came up with the theme of using your scraps, and that way I got to use a lot of my Flowers for Every Season scraps. Flowers for Every Season is a gorgeous paper collection, and it has flowers for every season. You've got tulips for spring, some roses that kind of could go, I'm not positive those are roses, something that could go for many seasons. Here's some roses, sunflowers. They're just really pretty papers, and there's even poinsettias for Christmas and winter seasons. Here's some wintry looking florals, and so I used a whole bunch of this. Here's the other side. And so I needed to use those little scraps. These scraps are ranging in sizes, but they're all about 3/4 of an inch wide. And so I had a bunch of them, and I just went through and I pulled out a bunch that I thought looked nice together. And you can go with different colors. You can go look at this side. You've got pinks and yellows, so you could look for scraps that worked with that. I think there's a different floral. Nope, you could put that with green, so you could have gone with the brighter pinky colors, or I flipped them to this side and I went with the more earth colors and a blue. So I grabbed these little sample sizes here, these little 3/4 inch wide strips of paper. Now when I am going to create something where I want my pattern to stay nice and straight, rather than adhere it directly to the cardstock, I grabbed some of my grid paper here. You could use copy paper too. I like that this has lines in it, and I'm using up things that got really dirty, so I had a bunch of grid paper that had a whole bunch of stamped images on it. This is probably the cleanest looking of the sheets when I cut them up, but you can see it had some stamps on it from a previous project. So when it gets really filthy like this, I grab it and I cut it down, and then I have this little piece here, and this is probably about, it's not quite 4, so it looks like 3 3/4 by about 5. And so I'm going to use this to help me adhere my strips, and then when I'm done adhering them, I'm just going to trim off the end and attach it to my card. Now if you have some smaller sizes like I did, because when I cut these off, so I'm going to line them all up here, then I had all these little tiny pieces left over, and at some point the pieces get so small, but then I had a bunch of pieces like this. So then I thought, what do I do with that? And so I used them in this way. So you can use your little tiny scraps too, so you can, just kind of use up your scraps. It's kind of a nice way to use them up. And then I had some that were this small. Now this is really tiny, and I almost tossed these. I don't have very many of these just yet, but I'm going to save them up because another one of my team members, I got her swap card today, and so she used just a ton of these little, look at these little skinny strips. This is from team member Pat. So these are really skinny little tiny strips, and so you can use up even your little teeny tiny strips too. And I only have a couple of these, so I don't have enough to make a whole card, but I'm going to hang on to my little strips, and then that way if I end up with a bunch of these, I'm going to attempt her pattern. So there's a lot of different ways. There's quite a few techniques and ways to use scraps, and there's fun ways to cut them in different angles. You can even use paper punches and use them that way. I've got a few videos up on using scraps. I put them all together on a piece of thin grid paper like this and used a punch to punch out a shape. Those are nice. I had some butterflies like that, so I had some really skinny papers, and I glued them onto a piece like this. And this paper is thin enough where I could, even with the 2 layers, I was able to punch through. I had a butterfly that had lots of cute little patterns on that. It's one of my older videos. You can look it up. I think it's called Use Your Paper Scrap Strips. That's a fun way. You can punch it out with hearts, you can punch it out with stars. Just use your little strips, and when you put them on a piece of paper like this, you can cut them into anything. You can use your die cuts or your punches. So anyway, let's make this card, because I need a few more for my swap. So anyway, what I do, and you can do this different ways. Some people like to use liquid glue. I like to just use my snail or my adhesive like this, tape runner type. And I'm going to just go ahead and lay it down right on the end there. And then I'll do another one. I've got them all laid down, and then I'm going to go ahead and trim off the ends. Now I have Stampin' Up! Paper trimmer. I use my guillotine, which is like the kind that comes down and chops them normally, but because that's too big to put under this video, let's see how my paper trimmer does. Oh, it still cuts through all those layers. So here's what I meant about having all these little tiny pieces left over. That's what I use to make this kind of a pattern. And I'm going to mount this onto some Just Jade cardstock, and that'll look really pretty. Now, I just cut the tiniest little bit off of that. I'm going to turn it around so that my flattest side is there. Okay. And finally this side. Let's see, what size am I making this? I try to get it to a nice even size, although sometimes it's not as easy to do. There you go. So it's not a precise size. It kind of depends on what kind of scraps you have. Mine were all 3/4 of an inch, and if I put another one on there, then it would be too wide. So I stopped at 5 pieces of designer series paper. So depending upon how wide, if you've got 1-inch scraps or even skinnier 1/2-inch scraps, you can decide how many you need. I went with 5. I thought it was a good place to stop. And now I'm going to mount that onto some cinnamon cider. Now usually I open my cards in a kind of a book way, and this time I decided, somebody said that's called hamburger way, and this one's called hot dog way because it's longer. So anyway, normally I go the other way, but I decided just for fun I would do it this way. So I'm going to go ahead and attach that. And I'm just going to kind of center it. Okay, and now I'm going to use this stamp here, wishing you every happiness this special day will bring. I kind of think this is a fun stamp set because you can use it for many occasions. I was thinking it could be used as a birthday. Maybe I'll put birthday on the inside. It can also be used as a wedding. You could do congratulations. I don't know that this is necessarily wedding-ish looking, but thinking of you. It's called Peaceful Moments, and it has a lot of different sentiments that can kind of work with a lot of things, and I really like this stamp set. The size is good, and anyway, I really like it, so I'm going to use that. And I looked through my stash, since I'm all about scraps today. I looked for some white cardstock, some Whisper White. I found this big long one, and I'm going to go ahead and stamp my sentiment in. I'm going to go with the blue that's in here, which is Misty Moonlight. Go ahead, and I like to stamp first, and that way I can line it up and make it nice and straight with the punch. Alright, so I've got my punch piece, and I'm going to go ahead and stick it down, but I'm only going to stick it down on one side for now. I'm going to use some dimensionals. I only stick it down on one side because I want to slip something underneath it, but I want it down just so that I know exactly where everything is going to go. Okay, now next I'm going to use this little punch. I wanted to use the daisy punch. This is the smaller of the two. The other one's a little bigger. I think they call the smaller one medium, so maybe there's someday going to be a small one. But anyway, this is this medium, and I looked for some pieces that are smaller. I try to use up the smallest size I can get away with when I'm using up my scraps. And since I'm going to have this daisy tucking underneath my sentiment, I thought, you know what, I might as well use this, and that way it's too skinny to use for so many things. It was too skinny for this, but you're not going to see all those petals. And that way I can get, you know, I can get quite a few daisies out of it, because you're only going to see a couple. And then I can save that one. I only needed 2. I went a little crazy. So because I'm tucking it underneath my sentiment, no one will know that that's not even a full daisy. So it's just another way to use your smaller pieces. I'm just going to make sure it clears that daisy. There. Okay, so then I'm going to work on this yellow one. I already punched them out. This is Bumblebee, by the way. And I punched a little center in Cinnamon Cider. I'm going to give that a moment to set up, and while it does, I'm going to make these little leaves. So I'm using Just Jade ribbon, and I like this. It's nice, and it's easy to tie a bow ribbon, but I'm not going to use it as a bow. I'm going to just make a loop. Let me find, here it is, my tear tape. When I'm going to do something like this, it's so easy to just grab a little piece of tear tape, and my little trick for this is I'm going to just make a loop and another loop, and then I'm going to wrap my tear tape around it. That way it's already got adhesive on both sides. I don't have to tie a bulky knot, and I can slip it, oops, right underneath here, like so. And those are going to act as leaves for my sunflower. And then I'm going to just attach my sunflower. I'm going to pull that out a little bit further. I'm going to attach my sunflower right on top, like so. And I'm going to shove a little dimensional kind of in between the 2 leaves to have that stick down too. And there I have my card. Okay, now for the inside, I like to use a piece of Whisper White. And here's yet another opportunity to use some of your scraps. I'm going to go ahead and attach this. And then you can look through your scraps. Here's another piece of cinnamon cider. So I need to trim it to 4 inches. And there you go. You've got a nice little another place to use your scraps. So I hope you like my little scrap busting, stash busting cards here. And I have a little challenge going up at my Facebook page, Beth's Paper Cuts Idea Sharing Group. It's a private group, so you have to ask to join, but I hope that you will. I approve everyone. It's just a way to maintain the group. So I have a little challenge. People are showing off their scrappy cards. So a lot of people have put in some cards that they've made using up scraps. There's a lot of fun ways to do some scrap techniques. So I hope that you'll join my group and show us what you're making. Thanks for watching. Bye.